Apple's just finished unleashing its brand new MacBooks on the world, the 14-inch and 16-inch MacBook Pros, powered not by the M1X, as was often rumored, but actually by two different chips, the M1 Pro and the M1 Max, which means maybe next year we get the Pro Max version, who knows. Now I'm going to try and go over the most important features in as short a video as possible so as not to waste your time. So let's get started first with the stuff that the two laptops have in common. They both sport a new design, somewhat different to the past, and well, that design has a lot of refreshes and a lot of yesteryear into it. First up, the connectivity. The I/O is much improved over the M1 of last year. We have free Thunderbolt 4 ports, one audio jack, an SD card reader, an HDMI port, and also a returning MagSafe port as well. The MacBooks can charge over any of those Thunderbolt ports or the MagSafe port respectively, so that's a lot of flexibility right there. Honestly, that was surprising to me. In spite of all the rumors we had of these ports making an appearance on the MacBook Pros, it's not like Apple hasn't thrown a few curveballs in its past. They included an actual section when they said you don't need dongles anymore. I'm not even sure this is Apple any longer, but secondly, both MacBooks get a massive improvement in terms of display. So we now get a liquid Retina XDR display. I hope I said that right. It's like the fifth time I'm filming that. This display supports ProMotion, so Apple's adaptive refresh rate technology that can go from 10 Hz all the way to up to 120. The displays also have much higher brightness. They're mini LED displays, similar to the one found in the 12.9-inch iPad Pro and the Pro Display XDR respectively, which means they reach a peak brightness of 1600 nits and sustained brightness of 1000 nits. So those are pretty impressive numbers. They're like double that of the M1 powered MacBook Pro that I have. So really massive upgrade there as well. Now for the first bit of bad news. Yes, the new MacBook Pros get an improved 1080p Full HD camera, but that camera is housed in a notch at the top of the display. So if you hate notches on your iPhones, you're gonna hate them on your MacBooks as well. Now onto the chips themselves. As the names heavily imply, they are based on the same basic architecture of the M1, which has been enhanced. So it's the same 5nm process node, but the architecture is slightly different. So instead of the 6-core M1, we get a 10-core chip which has 8 performance cores and 2 efficiency cores for both chips. The M1 Pro has a memory bandwidth of 200 GB per second, can support 32 GB of RAM, and has 16 core graphics, and can support 2 Pro Display XDRs externally, which is neat. On top of that, the M1 Pro has obviously even beefier specs. It takes the memory bandwidth up to 400 GB per second, it supports 64 GB of RAM, and has a 32-core GPU. And all of that technical mumbo jumbo means these are seriously capable chips. In terms of performance, they are significant upgrades over the M1, and perhaps even more so than the i9 Intel chip in the Intel-powered 16-inch MacBook Pros of the past. Now, a very important question to end all of this. Who are these new laptops for? Well, prosumers. Apple threw the word pro so many times in the presentation that almost sounded like a Tech with Andrei video. Like seriously, they used pro over and over and over again. So basically, these machines are not geared towards the everyday consumer, but more towards the people who will use these machines as tools of their trade in their day-to-day activities that they use to earn their livelihoods on. So it's not addressed to someone like me, for instance, who does some video editing on the side as a hobby. And as such, this is heavily reflected in price. And because that's the caveat of these devices. As amazing as they sound, they are super expensive machines. So the base 14-inch model starts at $2,000 and you can only go up from there. So a sizable chunk of change right there. The 16-inch is even more expensive. It starts at $2,600, I believe, and goes all the way up to $6,100 for a tricked out, all options ticked 16-inch model. So if you are hoping to replace your MacBook Air tomorrow, not quite yet, unless you have really deep pockets. A word of caution here, remember that 2021 is the great year of chip shortages. Every single thing out there that has electronics in it has been affected this year. In fact, Apple's own iPhone has been affected by this. Apple has had to slash production by about 10 million units, if I recall correctly, just a few days ago. And remember, the iPhone is by far Apple's cash cow, their most important product, and the one that they would have probably wished had no shortages at all. Remember that also the mini LED technology that goes into these displays is not that easy to manufacture. The iPad Pro 12.9 inch launched in spring also had a lot of initial availability issues. Keep this in mind. If you want to pre-order any of these new MacBooks, I would say you should be doing it sooner rather than later. Another small word of caution here: if you're a gamer, I would probably say these laptops are not necessarily for you. Even though the performance numbers look very impressive on paper, Apple made zero mentions of gaming in their presentation. The only time when they mentioned gaming was in terms of game development. So if you're a hardcore gamer and you're looking at these MacBooks and going, oh my god, they're going to have the best graphics performance out there, it might not mean much in terms of gaming support, so keep that in mind. And that's it for today's video. If you found it informative or useful in any way, please consider giving it a thumbs up and subscribing to the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.